Welcome back. Today we're going to go back to Kelly Galloup's T&A series, where we did the original T&A, we did a cone head. Now we're going to go with the T&A Bunker. This one, a lot of similarities with the platform on it. There's a little bit extra. The head is a lot different. This is where the T&A really started to evolve into more what we're seeing today. So we'll go ahead and just get started on this one. So on the back hook, it's going to be really similar to the back hook on the original and the cone head. We're just going to add a little bit of a two-toned effect to it, and we're going to do this one today in a whitefish colored theme. We're going to do it we're going to have this one in gray and white. The most common one that you'll see this in is in the rainbow trout colored version, I guess, or theme, however you want to put it. That's the most common one you'll see. You'll see some juvenile brown trout. We're going to do a whitefish one today though. And all we're doing is we're starting with just some Palmered Marabou. If I can find, there we go. We're going with some Palmered Marabou on this to start, and we're going to get 2 to 3 feathers in here depending on how well these ones go and how thick we want this. But we're just going to open loop that all the way to the front. We started at about the halfway point on this hook. The hook's an MFC 7050 size 2 for the back, and then we're going to use a 1 for the front. You can scale this up and down to the desired length. Probably the 2 and the 1's the more common combination that I'll tie these in. I like the overall length of it. It seems to fit the majority of the baitfish sizes that we see out here. So back to another plume here. I went through and pre-selected these to save a little bit of time, not have to be searching through all of that Marabou. So just make sure that when you're picking them that you've got good ones that are going to palmer well for you. All of the qualities that we look for, that we talked about in previous videos. Relatively long length, not a thick stem at all on this. Make sure that my hand's out of there. Relatively long length, a thin stem, and then some good webby individual fibers there as well. Go ahead and tie that off, and I think we're going to put one more in there just to fill this out a little bit more. Go ahead and peel that back some. Yeah, I want to get one more in there. So those first 2 that I tied in, I pretty much just did some open loop wraps on these. And for this one, I'm going to have them a little bit closer together. I want to find one that's decently webby here. This one looks pretty good. That one looks pretty good. So we've got a good long feather here, really nice webby individual fibers. We'll get that tied in. And then these wraps here, I'm going to make more so one on top of the other. I'm not going to have these spread out as much. That way I don't have to go back over lot of this like I do on those first two, on the first two feathers. You'll see where I had to go almost halfway back what I tied in to get it to lay how I want it to. With this stuff right here, with these wraps being one in front of the other, it's going to kind of lay each wrap is going to help pull back the previous ones slightly, so they're not standing straight up like the ones were before, and we had to go back over them with our thread to get them to lay how we want them. So there we go. We've got a nice thick back section. We've got 3 plumes right there, and I want to get this out of the way, trim that off, and I'm still going to go back over this a little bit just to get these fibers to lay back a little bit better, but not near as far back as I did before. And another reason to do this is I'm just creating a little platform here to tie in my toner color. Like I said, we're going to do this one in a gray and white today, so we're going to go into the gray Marabou here, and I didn't pick these ones out, so you'll have to bear with me on that. And I just want to find a feather that's going to have some good length, and it's going to be decently thick. If I have to, I'll double it up. If I feel like I don't have enough color on the top, I'm not going to wet this one, so we'll be able to see the color differential there. So you see, we've got that going back about, I don't know, what would I guess there, 3/4 of the way back, maybe even a little bit further on the actual body. On the shorter hook combinations, you can get that to lay all the way back on the entire length of the body, but you'd really have to find a really almost a perfect feather to get that to lay the whole way back on this hook size here. But it really doesn't make a whole big difference. As long as you're going about 3/4 of the way back, you're going to be pretty good there. So I'll look over the top of that. I think I want one more on that. It's a little on the sparse side. So I'm going to find one more feather to tie in there. A lot of these have some really webbed portions up at the top, which I want to stay away from, because it's not like we're tying in a shorter section like we do with a tail or anything. So there's webbed sections, and I'll show you what I mean by that when I tie this, or when I pick the next one out. They wind up showing up pretty good, and it makes it pretty apparent. So you want to make sure that you don't have any stem or anything up here. You've got free flowing fibers for the most part. A little bit of a stem up there is not going to be a big deal, but if you go getting into a really thick stem, it's going to be really apparent when you tie that in. So you want to find those nice free fibers up at the top right there, and there you can see our color break that we have between the gray and the white. I just want to peel this back and clean this head section up slightly, and then we'll go ahead and whip finish. There we go. We'll go ahead and whip finish that, and then we'll get our connection together. Get that out of the way there. Just wet that down slightly. And then we've got some 19 strand Beadalon, and then I'm going to pick two 6/0 blue beads here. Somewhere I put my Beadalon. Grab our 2 beads, we'll go ahead and get this thrown on and our back portion's done. Grab those 2 beads, get those off to the side, and then we'll get our size 1 70/50 in. And I'm going to start this right where my head is going to start with the wool. So then we'll just take this back to the ascent of the barb of the hook, get a good thread base down, and then we'll get our connection, or we'll get our back hook tied in. Same as always on this, just making sure that you go with the wire parallel to one another. If you can look on that side right there, you can see I've got some parallel wires in between those 2 beads. It's not twisted up. And then get this right on the side. There we go. Take a look at the distance on your connection. I kind of like the way that that's sitting right there. I'm not going to adjust it too much. We've got the same width right there, and then the length of our ring on this back side is about the width of those 2 beads. So after some loose wraps there, I'm just going to tighten that up, get everything locked into place, and then I'm going to make 1 wrap underneath, get that secured, and we'll get this in the cradle, or we'll get that in the material clip, get that out of the way. Try not to run it through our thumb here on the rest of this fly. And then we'll just double our wires over as always, get those connected, and then I'm going to go back with this one on the opposite side. And tie those together. After that's done, we're going to go into some silver holographic. This is some Flashabou here. I'm going to take somewhere between 5 and 10 strands. I'm just going to take that out, double this stuff over, somewhere about like that. Oh, I think that'll be good. Got the majority of those in my mouth. So then what I want to do is I just want to take these back into right about where my thread wraps are. If you can see that with my hand being in the way. I'm just going to take those back into where the thread wraps are, is where it's going to end. And this is just a little bit of internal flash for this fly. And then I'm going to have those starting on my side, but I'm really rolling those closer to the top of the hook with my thread. And then the same thing, I'm going to put these on the opposite side, but it's more so toward the top than anything. And then I just want to get those secured into place, trim that off, and then we have some Flashabou going back into acting as a skirt section. And you can always take your thumbnail and just kind of press those down and around, and then you got some good coverage, almost a half moon on the top. Not really concerned about anything going on the bottom side, just making sure that you've got a half moon coverage on the top. That's going to give you some pretty consistent flash throughout that. Now we're back to our Marabou. Should be able to get this in 3 plumes depending on how good these plumes are. It may take a 4th, but we'll see. I think I picked out some pretty good ones. Now we're going to take and just open loop this one once again. We're going to set this in, get our hackle pliers, making sure that your feather is going in the right direction to where when you lay it back, or when you wrap this, the feathers are going to lay back toward the tail of the fly. There's a lot of static in the air here. It's making those those individual fibers a little erratic. We've got winter here in full force these last couple of days. It's pretty mild winter overall, but we're paying for it now. It's supposed to be down to like -32, I think, on later in the week. It's about -12 out there now, so it's a heat wave compared to what we're going to be seeing. Needless to say, we won't be getting out on the river anytime soon. Oh, that one's a little beat up. This is a good piece right here. A little on the short side, but we'll make it work. I'll probably have to go into a 4th piece on this. If you want to fast forward to where I start putting in the gray on the top, I don't blame you, because there's nothing new happening here. Just listening to me BS about the weather and static and feathers. Real riveting stuff, I'm sure, for everybody that's on the opposite side of the camera. Once again, nothing new here. May help to wet my fingers just a little bit to get those fibers to lay back a little bit more, and then we're just open looping right to the end of the feather. Get that one tied in. This is a bulky fly on the vise, but really, I mean, it retains some good bulk even when it's in the water, but it does slick down slightly, but it still has a decent amount of bulk. If you want to, at this point, you could go with some gray to tie into that overwing if you want. You can tie a stack in, but a lot of it winds up getting lost on the rest of the Marabou that we're going to palmer in with the white. So I'm not going to do that here. We're just going to find some good pieces to give us good coverage. I want to make sure when I tie that in that gray that I tie in here is going to touch this gray in the back, so it looks continuous and it's not like a jointed piece right there. It looks like 2 separate flies. So if you want to, or if you have some shorter Marabou, maybe you don't think that you have quite the length that you're going to need with the stuff that you have, this is a good point to go and tie in, even if it's just one piece, just to make sure that you have that continuous color transit, or that continuous color on the top. There we go. I think that's going to do it. We're going to get away with 3 on that one. Go ahead and tie this off, get that out of the way. We'll peel these fibers back slightly. Wet my fingers and get this stuff back. And I'm just going to make about 3 to 4 wraps back just to lay those feathers down a little bit more. And then there we go. We have our nice platform where we're going to tie in our gray over the top. Automatically, I know that I'm going to go with 2 plumes on this. Like I was talking about earlier with these free-flowing feathers, I'll get to compare and contrast here. And then with these webby ones, I'll show you what we're talking about, but let me find another good one here before I move on to that. That's a winner right there. That's a winner right there. That'll be my top one. So these free-flowing ones, like I was talking about right here, you can see that stem, I mean, it's really sparse going all the way up through there. And then these feathers are nice and long going into that. Let me get that out of there so it's not against the white background. But that's a really nice one right there. This one, where it has these shorter feathers, get my hand out of the way, where it has these shorter feathers right here that just kind of make like a little crow's foot type appearance. Those can be really tough to get away, or to, let me put my hand behind there. I need a better background. Really not the best. You can kind of see what I'm talking about, but not really. But those make it really tough. If you have a lengthy feather, it makes it really tough to hide that, honestly. So I tend to go with these ones that have just the free-flowing feathers, not a thick stem, consistent length on the fibers all the way up to the top. So then we'll go ahead, get that into place, and like I was saying before, we want this gray going back into the gray from our last overwing section. So I'm just going to take and tie that in, square everything up. And you can see when I hold that down, the gray is going to go into the gray. So we're covered there. And then I want to get one more piece. This is a nice thick piece here. It's got good length to it. That's going to give us a really nice two-toned effect on the top of this fly. I'm going to wet that one down actually. That's a pretty wild one there. So I'm just going to wet that down. I'm going to lay that over the top, same length as the last one that I tied in, and then just tie that in, secure it into place, and then I'm just going to retain this for a little bit of bulk going right down the center. It gives me not really the bulk that I'm worried about on that, but what I'm really after is a platform to really tie that ram's wool down into place. Now before I go and move on to the head here, I'm going to take just one strand of lateral scale and I'm going to run this down the side just for a little bit of extra flash. You can skip this step. A lot of times with the rainbow colored or the rainbow themed fly on this T&A Bunker, you could use either like some pink Marabou, or a lot of times I'll see like some big fly fiber or something along those lines to where it's just going to give me a nice pink lateral line. But for this gray and white, I'm just going to go with some lateral scale, running those right down the sides. I have it going about 3/4 of the way back, the length of the fly. And then same thing on this side, I'm just going to take and trim that off 3/4 of the way back. One little lateral line right there, and that thing, let me see if I can get, there's the angle to where it's reflecting a bunch of light there. One little line, and that thing really makes that fly pop. So now, what I want to find is something to hold all of this material back for me. Oh, I thought I had a straw there, but I guess not. I'm just going to get this stuff out of the way. It's going to make it easier to tie this fly, or to tie the head on this and put the eyes on and everything. That it should be a little bit easier to see without everything flowing around there. So this is just some ram's wool that I'm going to take. We're going to do this two-toned, gray on the white, or gray on the top, white on the bottom, same theme as we have for the entirety of the fly. Now with this piece right here, I'm going to use some of these tips for a collar. So I'm going to use some of them. A lot of this stuff right here I'm not going to need. Now I want to just tie this in, and actually I need to go the opposite direction. Spin that around. We'll just tie in that V right there. Secure that into place. And then we're going to do the same thing with the white here. We're going to take this white and go on the bottom. I'm gonna see what it looks like as I get closer to the front. I may do a third stack on this. Typically I try and get away with just doing 2 of them, but we'll, like I said, we'll see how it looks. A lot of this stuff on the bottom we really don't need. It's just, this isn't the best quality of ram's wool either, but we're gonna make it work. So then we're gonna use 1, 2, 3, and you see I didn't use that same thread path that I used for the gray. I don't want to spread that out any more than what it already is. So I'm going to advance this up to the front now. I'm going to stay about 2 thread wraps behind the eye on this, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put a V on the top, a V on the bottom, and we're going to press forward with trimming this thing up and putting our eyes on. Like I said, not the best quality at all here on this ram's wool. Got a lot of waves to it. Can actually use that stuff that I cleared out. That's probably the best material that I'll get out of this. Once again, we're just going to set that in place right behind our eye. I'm going to go 1, 2, pull down tight, get a few more wraps to clean everything up there. And then once again on the bottom, we're going to go with the white ram's wool. Clean everything out in the comb. I'm going to knock the tips off of this one, and then just a little bit on that bottom as well. Get this on the bottom, make sure that we're nice and centered. Get that into place. I'm keeping the tension on that. There we go. I'm keeping the tension pulling upward on this to make sure that it's not going to go flying all over the place on me, and it's going to stay on the bottom. And then I just want to take and whip finish this here. I don't really know that I'm happy with that. I don't really know that I'm happy with that gray that I have there. I want to tie a little bit more in the front. I'm going to try and find something that's not all just junk. Some of that stuff was just way too wavy. I'm going to try and clean this stuff out really good, get some of this stuff that's going to stay in the comb, and then tie that in with some of the good stuff that I have right here to try and get that to cooperate a little bit better for me. And I think I like how that's going to sit right there. I'm just trying to make that head not seem so sparse on the top. The white's a little bit better material than the gray. I could just tell that gray was going to want to look pretty sparse there, so I added another one on the top. Typically I won't if I have good wool. Those two V's are enough to fill this head out, but I just didn't like how sparse that looked, so let me back that up. Get our final whip finish in, and then before we go putting the eyes on, I want to take and clean this up. I want to pick through this with a bodkin. Oh, where'd it go? I got another bodkin back here somewhere. There we go. I just want to pick this stuff out, and I'm not really mixing these two together. Caught my Marabou. I'm not really mixing these two together to where I'm pulling the gray down into the white. I just want to keep that all on the top, and I want to keep that on the bottom, keep those two separated. I got some ram's wool there that I needed to pick out. There we go, and then we're going to clean this bottom up. Just running our bodkin right through there. And then you want the sides of this, you can still see my thread wraps and everything right there. You want the sides of this nice and narrow, and then rounded on the top and bottom. So it kind of gives that appearance of the head of a fish. So I'm just going to round this stuff off. I'm just making some broad cuts here to start. Get that out of the way. And then same thing, I want to shift that stuff just slightly. Making sure that I'm on the bottom side there. And I just want to round this section as well. There we go. We're starting to come into shape there. And I'm actually going to take this out of the vise for now, because I want to make some more sculpting cuts on this, and it's easier to do this when you cut against the grain. So I really want to get my shape coming in here. I just want this nice and rounded at the top, and then I'm actually gonna take these sides and I'm gonna flatten them out. I want to flatten those out pretty good. There we go. We can round this section a little bit more. As I get to the sides, I'm a little bit more aggressive with making those a little bit thinner. So basically I want my bulk on the top and the bottom, and then a really narrow head on the sides. Just trimming that out a little bit more. I may have gotten carried away with that one there. That looks alright. So there you can see our sides are pretty narrow, and then the profile that you get on the bottom, it has a pretty big profile there. I'm going to narrow those sides down a little bit more. Now that I have it in the vise, I'm just going to lay this flat and take a couple trims just to really flatten that stuff out some more. There we go. We're starting to get our eyes our thread wraps visible to where we're going to place our eyes. Get this tied back in here, and then I want to just round this off a little bit more going to the back. There we go. That looks pretty good. I'm going to leave that top in there. I'm going to leave that as like a little bit of a collar to transition back to the gray Marabou that we have tied into place there. And then the last thing that we're going to do is put in some eyes. I'm going to use some Loctite gel. I want to make sure that I'm able to get to my thread wraps, which are right there. I can still see my thread wraps. And then with this one, it's a little bit bigger of a fly. I'm going to go with some 8mm. Typically on the smaller ones, I'll go with the 7mm eyes. But let me make sure there's something on this one that I didn't like. It's just a piece of plastic. Alright, so these are a blue radiance from MFC. Neat little color combination. And as soon as I can get some gel going there, I want to make sure that that gel is going to be able to touch my thread wraps, and it's not going to be strictly on the ram's wool. I want that stuff going into the thread, and then the same thing on this opposite side. Pick out where my thread goes, make sure I have my eyes in the same distance forward. Get a good glob of that gel right there, and then just double check this, make sure that my eyes are going to be spaced properly. Set that into place, and then I'm going to go for, I really press these in, make sure that they're even, make sure that you don't have any glue coming out and it's going to stick to your fingers. And then I'm really going to press these two together, and what that's doing is it's bringing that gel from both sides. It's touching the thread wraps, and then the gel winds up bonding in between the two, and your eyes are locked in place. You're not going anywhere with that. So now we'll just clean this up a little bit, get that clip out of there, and clean my lateral lines up slightly. Find my lateral line on that side. And there we go. That is, oh, one thing I wanted to mention before, I almost forgot about it. On the original, on these, the eyes Kelly used were those doll eyes. They were just a black or a white, like 7mm, 8mm, whatever. You get them in a lot of craft stores and everything. They were just the white background with the black pupils, but the black pupils moved inside of there, and it actually make a little bit of a click. I really like working with those. I like using them. It's almost like the same effect as having a rattle on built into the fly. I don't know, it's just a little bit extra, creates a little bit of an extra wavelength for, you know, the sound and everything. Draws a little bit more attention, but I haven't had those eyes there for a couple of years, so I need to see if I can find a couple to tie these with. But that little bit of that movement in the eyes would make a little bit of a click, and believe it or not, that is sometimes enough to get the attention of a fish. So we're going to give this a quick spin here. And that is Kelly Galloup's T&A Bunker. If you guys have questions or comments on this one, leave them with me. We're going to go through the rest of the T&A series over the next couple of probably months. We'll get into the rest of the ones in the T&A series and kind of discuss some of the differences between the two, talk about the overall platform itself and how it transitioned from where it started to where it's at now. But like I said, questions or comments, leave them with me and I'll get back to you. Thanks as always for watching, and we'll catch you on the next fly.